Welcome back, everybody, at RFL. Now, as we broadcast tonight, as I said, only 200 days here from the November election. It seemed like it would never come. Well, at least we can see it in the distance at this point. We're talking not only about the race for the White House, but how to parse through these numbers, make any sense of them. And right now, the numbers say this thing is really close. The president might be up by a couple points by most polls, but basically it's within the margin of error. And that's despite circumstances here that ought to favor anybody on the Republican side. It's a challenger. But why is the race as close as it is? If you were only to look at key numbers, you'd think the president, he'd be walking away with this thing right now. And Andrew, we got into some of them. There's some debate over it, but almost nobody disagrees on the female vote, Latino vote, and on the favorability of Romney. He should be in a lot more trouble than at least the overall says he is.
He should, and I like how we categorized the last segment as some debate. It seemed like quite a bit, but in prior elections, all you needed to do was take a snapshot of a few key polling numbers, and you'd know who was likely to win the White House. One key for an incumbent president, job performance, and pretty good numbers there for President Obama. He's +6 with a 48% approval rating in the latest Times CBS News poll. Another big one would be foreign policy. And there you see the president also in positive territory by 10 points, unusual for a Democratic incumbent president. What's more, Mitt Romney, as Rich showed you last segment, a distinctly unpopular candidate, and the president is popular. Here's that same poll, the different looks at the two candidates, and look at the favorable numbers and the big difference in the favorable numbers. Yes, President Obama's unfavorables are bigger than his favorables, but only 29% of voters have a favorable view of Mitt Romney right now, and yet, despite all that, the race remains a dead heat, as Richard showed you, 46-46.
Okay, now I think there's two different schools of thought as to why, or at least in my head there are. Maybe you guys got different theories. Yes, with those numbers he ought to be well ahead, but I think the first reason you could think is, in a tough economy, you're going to go for the other guy, to say, hey, you know what? I can envision it should have been better the last 4 years. Whether that's fair or not, it doesn't matter. Public will say, I'll go for what's behind door number B just because it's unknown. Do you think that's what's driving this?
I think what drives every single presidential election is the economy. Going back to the more recent memory, the second Bush term against Clinton, it's about the economy. This economy is stagnant. It is not moving anywhere. And in no recent memory, as Tim pointed out earlier, we have an unemployment rate. And you got to remember, we have dropped millions of people off who just aren't looking anymore. So you have 24 million Americans looking for work, unemployment at 8.2%. Really, it's probably above 10%.
But Tom, I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I'm only getting at is I haven't heard anybody, when you look through the polls, say, well, the initiatives that Romney would bring, I love those. Let's go for that instead.
Well, wait a second. Hey, if I can jump in here, because we've got some polling numbers on this too. Without going into the specifics of what Mitt Romney would do, we show you here would make the right decisions on the economy. More people choosing Romney at this point and confident in his choices than in the president's. Would improve your financial situation, you at home, the viewer. More people, look at that number for make worse for President Obama. 38% think that President Obama would make their situation worse. And you can see Mitt Romney's numbers much better. And then lastly, we'll bring real change to the White House. You can see the split there. The big split there is change for the worse. 20% say that Obama would bring change for the worse. Only 7% say that Mitt Romney would. It's the incumbent's dilemma right now. People
but
know,
I think if you look at that,
President Obama, they don't know Mitt Romney.
That's on the extreme polls, okay? The number that was most telling for me was 47% for each of them thought it wouldn't change anything, right? I believe on the extremes on the right, they're more passionate about hating Obama than loving Romney. And I think then even that on the left, I think there's some disappointment with Obama from the far left. So I think the polls, but I don't think that's going to change the election.
Here's the biggest problem for Obama. If you look inside and you look for any incumbent president, when you have that number out there that right now is 46, you got about 8-9% undecided voter out there, okay, today. If you're an incumbent president and you are going to lose undecided voters dramatically on election day. And that's why his biggest problem is when you look at independent voters, he's getting killed among them.
Okay, but here's my thing, Dom. To me, I think there's one other thing. And we're not going to have a lot of time for it, so I'll just let you get the 2 cents on this, which is...
Okay, disagree with me.
Don't you dare. No, but what's different about this guy? What's different about the dialogue? If you think about any recent... Think about this, guys. Time out. There hasn't been really one comparable scandal that's rocked this White House compared to recent
How
ones?
about the reason why I was smiling while
Says
Tom,
Laurentiis
while
for
Tom,
Dominic.
while Tom
Solyndra?
was the
No,
reason
but
why,
nobody's talking
the
about that. Give me a
reason
break.
why
We
I
will.
was smiling while my good friend was speaking. When it's on your watch, you inherit the problem.
Right.
But notice I said inherit. Did this economy start under Obama, or was he handed the Titanic on day one?
Quote, I'll give you the quote. Let me spend $1 trillion of your money in February of 2009.
But why did he have to do that?
And wait,
But why did he have to do that?
And his quote was, by the summer of 2010, the unemployment rate will be under 7%.
Okay, but wait.
That's
Wait,
what he
but-
said.
but- but-
That's
but-
what he
okay,
said.
okay,
Okay,
so
that's what he
okay,
said.
I'm sorry.
That's what he
No,
said.
so
That's
let's
what he
go
said.
to what you were asking.
Well, here's
That's
what I'm
he
getting
said.
at. What is this president called that I haven't heard before?
Just about everything.
I've
They've
heard about
called him everything.
that he's been a Kenyan, that he's unpatriotic,
He eats dog meat.
Muslim.
Nobody
Dog
cares about
meat.
that.
I
You
mean,
think
but-
so?
okay,
He'll
so
drum
wait,
it every
wait,
night on a
Richard-
certain
but
channel.
If listen, those people who are voting Republican, no matter, those are the people
Richard-
who are the extremes.
But there's been a
the middle,
legitimacy
people like
of
I
myself don't
really
care
want to get
about
to the
that.
issue.
He's an American. He's a
and
Christian.
Tom- you don't, but
Tom
he's
is
a-
not going to like this.
he's an
But
American.
people like me, people like Andrew, people like Tom, we dance around this every night. Oh, Obama, you know, his numbers are so
Do
much
not-
higher.
do
His
not play
numbers-
the
his
African-American
numbers-
card.
Oh, you know where I'm
Do
going.
not play
his
that
numbers
card.
are so much. His
That's
numbers are so much
ridiculous.
higher
Oh,
than Romney's.
please.
Here it
Why
goes.
is this
Here
race?
we go.
Why is this race
Oh,
neck and neck?
so we elected
Could
him,
it-
but now all of a
could
sudden
it
because
be-
he's an African-American, it's no good. Oh, that's cheap,
wait.
Dominic.
So the first black president,
That's no
he
good.
doesn't face obstacles that no other president has faced.
I think quite
He doesn't
frankly,
have the governor of Arizona pointing her finger in his face
I quite
as the
frankly,
president of the United
as the
States of
governor of
America.
Arizona, she should have pointed her finger in his face to say,
Name
leave
one-
me alone.
Okay, Tom.
Leave
Tom,
us alone. You're not
Tom,
protecting
Tom,
us here.
You know I love you
think that has
dearly.
to do with he's
I love you
black?
dearly.
'Cause he's
Name
black?
one other president that's been done to. Name one.
That had the finger put
Yes,
in his face?
that a sitting governor pointed their finger in his face.
Tom, what would your reaction have been if that was President Bush getting that finger in his
Right.
face?
Name one other president that's
you would have hit the
Andrew,
ceiling.
Andrew, with
And
all-
Obama
wait
couldn't
a sec,
respond
wait a second.
because if he
Wait,
responded to governor, he would have been an angry black man.
I do not remember a president, and listen, there have been people who called Obama some pretty bad names. The names that consistently every single night that George W. Bush was called, and none of you rushed to his defense. As the president of this United States, I'm not a person who criticizes my president that way. I disagree. But the names they called Bush, you think it's okay now?
No, Tom.
Because Jan Brewer, governor, said you didn't do
No,
right by
but
us?
Tom,
Oh, dear God.
it's a little different only in one thing. You're right. They called him war criminal. They said terrible
Everything.
things.
Hitler
But
they
can you
called him.
just imagine for one moment if Obama took the nation to war and then we learned what we did about Iraq? Do you imagine what we would be hearing every night
it'd be
about
different?
him?
You think it would be different?
Oh my gosh. The standard that he's been held to, I think is different. Now, whether or not it'll impact the election, I'm not. Oh, come on, Tom.
What
There's a-
more could he face than
Tom,
what
They
George Bush
questioned if
faced?
he wasn't even an American.
Oh, come on, but okay. The reason they questioned he's being an American is he couldn't produce his damn birth certificate.
No,
it
because
took him
his
years
name
to get
sounded-
No, Rich.
They
don't-
called him
Rich,
Osama on the air about 20 times.
Rich,
He couldn't
wouldn't
produce his birth certificate.
What did he?
What other president is asked to produce their birth certificate? Why should he? Why should he?
Well, listen, if they ask
He's
him
the
to produce it,
president.
you'll give
All
it
right,
to
Tom,
we're gonna
he's the
jump to a
president
break
of
here.
the United States.
This is a perfect
Well, there was a
segue
question
here.
where he grew up.
Tonight kind of lends itself to the MMA. And when we come back here, that's what we're talking about here as we leave politics and get into a fight. Andrew yelling him in the break here. That's fine. When we come back here, we're going to talk about whether or not it's time that the MMA gets legalized here in some of the remaining states in this country that won't allow it or won't sanction it in theirs. We're going to hear from a pro Ultimate Fighter after the break to make that argument.
I got an Ultimate Fighter.